How are these for opening lines? I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma. Whatever I do, for good or evil, to that I will fall heir. These were the very first lines in the film Karmalink. Karmalink is a 2021 sci-fi film from Cambodia. And I watched it very recently. Very much appreciated this film. So Karmalink is set in the near future, and the main character is a boy, Lang Peng. He lives with his family on the edges of the Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh. His mother is fighting and organizing protests against the city's or the government's plan to relocate their community on the edges to make way for a bullet train path to China. His grandmother is also receiving treatments to help restore her memory. It doesn't seem to be trauma necessary, just something that she is afflicted with, and there is treatments. A medical researcher perhaps is showing up to give these treatments to her. And then Lang Peng also has a number of sisters, mostly older than him, doing different things, having different priorities. He seems to be the youngest of the lot. The film largely follows Lang Peng, and everywhere he goes, you see this disc that is on so many people's foreheads, and it signifies that they are using this auger technology. Anyone actively using it, I believe that it was lighting up to indicate they are experiencing an augmented reality overlaid on top of the existing world and interacting with that. So their behaviors can be very odd. It sort of reminds me when Bluetooth was really getting underway and people were baffled at someone right next to them talking into the ether, and really they're talking to somebody else. So this sort of brought back that feeling of being out of step with people around you. The individuals using the auger tech are certainly having odd mannerisms, gestures, whatever they're interacting with in the augmented portion is looking pretty odd in the main world. Lang Peng is mostly, of course, in this outlying community in a poorer section. And when I looked into the film later, the claim was that it was mostly the affluent who were using the tech, but that doesn't play out in the world itself. There's so many people around in his community who have the tech, who have the disc active and clearly interacting. And you're seeing people in all areas of life, random ones out and about, business folk. At one point, there's a monk who also clearly has the tech and utilizes it. So there doesn't seem to be as much of a divide as it was sort of claiming outside of the film. That was a little odd, but it doesn't seem to be out of reach for the poorer section for whatever reason. So this is the world that it is sort of set in, with these realities for the community struggling to not be displaced, even though this tech is also prevalent and clearly impacting people's lives and being a part of it as well. Lang Peng, in the midst of all of this, he is experiencing visions of his former lives, and he has a memory of a much earlier iteration of himself stealing a golden Buddha statue and hiding it. Lang Peng shares this knowledge of the memory with his friends, and they have decided that if he can run back through these memories, get up to the present day, they can actually track down this statue and use it to get the money needed to help their community out. And also getting wealthy in the process certainly doesn't hurt. At some point, they meet a girl, Srey, who also seems to be part of the community, but she's not in a particular home at this point after her and her brother lost the place that they were staying in. She says that she is good at finding things and is willing to be hired by them to help track down this statue. Most of the boys are skeptical, but Langping actually goes back to her to see if she's as good as she claims to be. She actually does manage to help him track down a shoe that he had lost just through the awareness of the community and being able to piece together info for that. And so he ends up hiring her to help him as he's going through these memories and sorting out how they can sync back up and find this statue. Karmalink is not exactly drama, but I suppose that fits. It's generally a more serious film, definitely adventure as well. The drive for discovery that propels the film is quite compelling. The more serious elements are not only the subject matter and the philosophical considerations around it, but also the setting and impact in Cambodia. It is set near future, and that doesn't detract from the concept of development in Cambodia and the impact it is having. The fact that it is not universally a good thing. To be fair, that's usually how it goes when something new or innovative or even something improving is being enacted in the name of progress, in the name of growth. Regardless of the good that is purported to or even certain to occur, there always seems to be negative impact on the poor, the disenfranchised, the non-upper crust portions of society. And of course, there's always those unfortunate enough to be classified as in the way of that progress being attempted. I did look into how Karmalink was developed as a film. Prior to this, I was aware that Cambodia had some short films for sci-fi, but this is claimed to be the first feature-length sci-fi film, and I have not found anything to disprove that claim. Turns out there is a nonprofit called Filmmakers Without Borders. They go into Asia and Africa and Latin America teaching about tech, media, film education, and allowing that knowledge to grow and try to nurture those industries in those areas with that education and building that up. The director, Jake Wachtel, I have no idea how to say it. Regardless, he was involved with that nonprofit and moved to Cambodia to teach film education. While he was there teaching, he was inspired to develop the story for the film and also film it in Cambodia. The two main children, Langping and Srey, they were students of his that he ended up casting with their own names for the characters in the film. On top of the inspiration from living and working in Cambodia and seeing these development efforts, there was also apparently the 2005 novel, Never Let Me Go, by Kazuro Ishiguro. Side note, that book was more directly adapted into the 2010 sci-fi film, Never Let Me Go. I won't spoil that film by diving into the book's plot, but even though it is not a direct adaptation by any means, I can see how it influences Karmalink. Both explore impact on marginalized communities in society that have to just cope with these impacts and these decisions that they are bearing the brunt of negative repercussions. And sometimes it can be more direct and sometimes more subversive, more subtle. I do find myself wondering how many film projects actually come out of this nonprofit going all around the world to teach. It's a nice thought that while teaching, a project like this can be in an area that does not have the industry built up and sort of encouraging that actual growth and nurturing people to want to pursue this and feel that it's viable as an opportunity. I've seen talk in other places about that issue. I've seen, I don't remember the name of the director, but it was an Irish filmmaker, and they were talking about the difficulty of actually filming and basing their production in Ireland because the UK is so built up, it's not an industry really in Ireland as a country. People may go to film on location here and there, but there's no development of the industry in Ireland as such because the UK is so massive and it's already there. Having said that, encouraging that creativity, that growth in a place that doesn't have it, it's really compelling because you're missing out on these perspectives because it's not currently in a lot of places for any number of reasons. But that also does not encourage the big industries that exist in certain countries to go elsewhere, minus the really fancy locations that they want to have settings evoke. It's something I would like to see more of, absolutely. Sadly, though it's unclear what happened, and I have no desire to dig and find out for curiosity's sake, but Lang Pang ended up dying before the film was released, and so it ended up being dedicated to him. What are the sci-fi elements of the film? It's mostly the auger tech. Unlike most of the films that have this type of technology, it's not taking center stage. It's not driving the plot and being the focal point. While Lang Pang and Srey access the auger tech to better retrieve and review Lang Pang's memories of earlier lives, we're mostly seeing the tech from the outside with these children who normally would never have access to the tech. There are auger tech cafes that are popping up where people can go and freely use the tech as they like. Perhaps it's a way to avoid problems walking around in the world and not really noticing troubling aspects. I'm not entirely sure what the draw is to have a specific tech cafe for this, but nevertheless, they do have it, and people absolutely congregate to them to enjoy their use of the technology. It seems to have a wide range of uses, but since it's largely seen from the outside, your imagination is left to consider the possibilities of the scope of the tech. At some point, it's revealed that no one below the age of 13 is actually allowed to get the implant necessary to utilize the tech. So it's not surprising that following these two children around means that there's a very limited view into the tech and what it can do. I actually find that more interesting, that it's not laid out and it's mostly sort of context from others and what you can glean from their rather odd behaviors about the purposes and potential of the tech. And since the film doesn't rely on the auger tech to drive the main story or the main characters, it's easy to allow your imagination that scope and freedom to consider. There is some other additional sci-fi elements that I won't go into so as to not spoil where the film continues, but even that still relies on the auger tech and what is necessary to use auger tech. I found the film and the foundations that it sort of rests on to be incredibly engaging. Karma as a concept and a foundation for understanding the world is absolutely underpinning the entire film. Lang Pang's memory exploration and where it leads is rooted in the cycle of rebirth. The premise of reincarnation has to be accepted to believe in these memories and what they contain, and pursue the path that you can be following as you go through these subsequent lives that build on the previous one. And the auger tech is really a vehicle to further, more easily pursue these memories. Far from being in conflict with this belief system and view of how the world operates and how people operate, it is used harmoniously to more immediately retrieve these memories and be able to access and review and gain further info within these memories and the progression of these formers' lives. The film goes further in fascinating ways that gave me more to reflect on and consider, and that is a massive plus point for me. Still not going to spoil the film and where it leads. If this is intriguing to you, by all means watch it, because this was an experience I was very happy to have. Still, the different facets behind this memory exploration and what Lang Pang is uncovering, they lead into some very thought-provoking and troubling areas of ethics, philosophy. There was quite a bit to chew on mentally. And it doesn't get reduced down in the end. It retains those layers and that complexity. It doesn't get reduced down to new tech equals bad consequences, and so immediately turn against tech. I'm definitely going to rewatch this. I feel that subsequent rewatching will give me even more to tease apart and consider and have thought experiments just to further explore these interesting areas of thought, of philosophy, how something like this could impact. Even when it's done, it doesn't close off these things to consider and ponder over. There's still stuff to think over and explore for yourself. I certainly like sci-fi that doesn't so readily engage in analysis and examination, but I won't lie, a good portion of the sci-fi films that I love the most, they do tend to have that element. And so did this. Last I checked, Karmalink is streaming on Amazon Prime and Canopy. And for those of you not in the know, Canopy is one of those services that tends to partner with public libraries. So you could very possibly access it with your own library card locally. And if your library does not partner with Canopy, there are other library systems in the US at least that you don't have to live locally to set up a library card and thus get access to Canopy. So, for any of you curious, by all means go check that out. I don't recall any off the top of my head, but there are a number out there that freely allow people outside of those areas to get an online library account and card, and that is enough to get you access to Canopy. And I also, when I looked, it could be rented or bought through Prime, I think Apple TV, and Fandango at Home. So if any of this piqued your interest, by all means, go check it out. I'm definitely hyping this film because I just straight up enjoyed watching it and I enjoyed what it brought my mind to consider. Of course, I'm going to be continuing to watch sci-fi. So, see you soon.